You're scrolling through social media when breaking news explodes across every platform about Real Housewives of Potomac star Wendy Osefo being arrested on multiple felony charges. The arrest took place in Carroll County, Maryland, where Wendy Osefo and her husband Eddie were taken into custody facing a staggering 16 criminal charges. 7 of those charges were felonies related to what authorities described as a sophisticated insurance fraud scheme. The news sent shockwaves through the Bravo community and beyond, as Wendy had built her entire public persona around being educated, professional, and morally superior to her castmates. The charges stemmed from allegations that the couple had staged a burglary at their home and filed fraudulent insurance claims totaling over $450,000. According to court documents, Wendy and Eddie reported that their home had been burglarized while they were vacationing in Jamaica, claiming that thieves had stolen expensive designer goods, jewelry, and luxury items. They had filed claims with 2 separate insurance companies, seeking maximum payouts for their supposed losses. What made the arrest particularly shocking was the stark contrast between Wendy's carefully cultivated image and the serious criminal allegations she now faced. Throughout her time on Real Housewives of Potomac, Wendy had consistently positioned herself as the most educated and accomplished member of the cast. She frequently mentioned her 4 academic degrees and her work as a political commentator and professor, using her credentials to claim moral and intellectual superiority over other housewives. The timing of the arrest was especially dramatic as it came just weeks after the current season of RHOP had finished filming. Fans who had been watching Wendy navigate petty drama with castmates about rumors and lifestyle choices were now confronted with the reality that she was facing serious felony charges that could result in significant prison time. The disconnect between the trivial conflicts shown on television and the gravity of actual criminal charges was jarring. Social media erupted immediately after news of the arrest broke. Related to Wendy's arrest trended on Twitter and Instagram as reality TV fans, bloggers, and commentators weighed in on the shocking development. Many expressed disbelief that someone who had presented herself as so educated and proper could be involved in what prosecutors alleged was blatant insurance fraud. The fall from grace was spectacular and very public. The charges detailed in the arrest documents painted a picture of calculated deception. Prosecutors alleged that Wendy and Eddie had deliberately staged their home to look like it had been burglarized, creating a false scene to deceive insurance investigators. The couple had then provided detailed lists of supposedly stolen items to 2 different insurance companies, allegedly hoping to collect duplicate payments for the same fictional losses. Most damaging to Wendy's reputation was how the alleged scheme contradicted everything she claimed to stand for on the show. She had positioned herself as someone who valued honesty, education, and doing things the right way. She had looked down on castmates for what she deemed to be questionable behavior or moral failings. Now she was facing allegations that she had engaged in deliberate fraud for financial gain, undermining every claim to moral superiority she had ever made. As details of Wendy Osefo's arrest continued to emerge, the investigation that led to the charges revealed a pattern of behavior that made the alleged fraud even more brazen. Police documents showed that detectives had conducted a thorough investigation that uncovered numerous inconsistencies in the couple's burglary report, ultimately leading them to conclude the entire incident had been fabricated. The investigation began when Wendy and Eddie returned from their Jamaica vacation and reported to police that their home had been broken into. They claimed that thieves had entered their house and stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of designer goods, luxury jewelry, handbags, and electronics. The couple appeared distraught and provided police with detailed inventories of everything they claimed had been taken, demonstrating what investigators later characterized as suspiciously precise knowledge of serial numbers and values. Detectives who responded to the scene immediately noticed inconsistencies that raised red flags. According to police reports, only 1 bedroom in the house appeared to have been disturbed, while the rest of the home looked completely normal. For a burglary supposedly involving hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen goods, the lack of widespread disturbance throughout the house seemed unusual. Experienced investigators knew that real burglars typically ransack multiple rooms searching for valuables. The most damning evidence against the burglary claim came from the couple's own security systems. Wendy and Eddie had both Ring cameras and an ADT security system installed at their home, which should have captured any intruder activity. However, when detectives reviewed the footage and system logs, they found no motion alerts, no triggered alarms, and no video evidence of anyone entering or exiting the property during the time frame when the burglary supposedly occurred. The absence of any security system activity was extremely suspicious for a home that allegedly experienced a major break-in. Further investigation revealed that several items Wendy and Eddie claimed had been stolen in the burglary had actually been returned to retailers years earlier for refunds. Detectives obtained records showing that luxury items appearing on the stolen property list had been refunded long before the supposed burglary even occurred. The discovery suggested that the couple had been padding their insurance claims with items they no longer owned, inflating the value of their supposed losses to maximize their payout. When investigators executed a search warrant of the Osefo home, They made a discovery that essentially proved the fraud allegations. Police found at least 15 items that appeared on the stolen property list still inside the house. These weren't similar items or replacements. They were the actual specific items that Wendy and Eddie had claimed were stolen, complete with matching serial numbers and identifying features. The discovery of supposedly stolen property still in their possession was devastating evidence that the burglary report had been fabricated. The financial investigation that accompanied the criminal charges revealed possible motives for the alleged fraud. Despite Wendy's public image of success and affluence, financial records suggested the couple was facing mounting debts and financial pressure. Sources close to the investigation indicated that Wendy and Eddie may have been struggling to maintain the lavish lifestyle they portrayed on reality television, leading them to allegedly scheme for insurance money to alleviate their financial strain. The involvement of two separate insurance companies in the fraud scheme showed what prosecutors characterized as calculated planning. By filing claims with multiple insurers for the same alleged losses, Wendy and Eddie were apparently attempting to collect duplicate payments that would have totaled far more than the supposed value of the stolen items. The strategy suggested sophistication in planning the fraud, making it harder to argue it was a simple mistake or misunderstanding. Court documents indicated that both insurance companies had become suspicious of the claims and had conducted their own investigations before ultimately reporting their findings to law enforcement. The insurance investigators had identified the same inconsistencies that police later discovered, including the lack of security system alerts and the presence of supposedly stolen items still in the home. The thorough documentation by insurance companies provided prosecutors with extensive evidence to support the criminal charges, while shockwaves from Wendy Osefo's arrest reverberated through the reality TV community. One person's reaction stood out for its unabashed celebration and vindication. Keiarna Stewart had built her platform partly on critiquing Real Housewives of Potomac cast members, and she had long maintained that Wendy Osefo's perfect image was a carefully constructed facade, hiding a more problematic reality. For years, Keiarna had posted commentary suggesting that Wendy wasn't as honest or as morally superior as she presented herself on television. The arrest on felony fraud charges felt like complete vindication for everything Keiarna had been saying. The first video Keiarna posted after news of the arrest broke was celebratory and unapologetic. She spoke directly to the camera with a huge smile, repeatedly saying variations of "I told y'all" and "I've been saying this." Her energy was that of someone who had been proven right after being doubted or dismissed for a long time. Keiarna made it clear she felt zero sympathy for Wendy, whom she characterized as someone who had been judging everyone else while allegedly committing serious crimes herself. Keiarna's content about the arrest went beyond just celebrating Wendy's downfall. She provided receipts and reminded her followers of previous commentary where she had hinted that something wasn't right about Wendy's situation. She pulled up old posts and videos where she had questioned Wendy's finances, her lifestyle, and her claims about her success. Each receipt was presented as evidence that Keiarna had known something was off long before the arrests happened. The vindication Keiarna felt was particularly strong because she had faced criticism and pushback for her commentary about Wendy. Defenders of Wendy had accused Keiarna of being jealous, hateful, or simply wrong about her assessments. Some people had even suggested Keiarna should face legal consequences for what they claimed was defamatory content about Wendy. Now, with Wendy facing actual felony charges, Keiarna felt justified in every criticism she had ever made. Keiarna's celebration included direct mockery of Wendy's signature phrases and behaviors. She referenced Wendy's constant mentions of her 4 degrees, suggesting that apparently none of those degrees taught her not to commit insurance fraud. She mimicked Wendy's tendency to lecture other cast members about behavior and choices, pointing out the hypocrisy of someone preaching morality while allegedly staging fake burglaries for insurance money. The content Keiarna produced in the immediate aftermath of the arrest was some of her most viewed and engaged material ever. Her followers flooded the comments with support, agreeing that she had been right all along and thanking her for not backing down despite criticism. The validation from her audience encouraged Keiarna to keep producing content about the situation, analyzing every new detail that emerged about the charges and investigation. Keiarna also addressed the speculation that she might have been the person who tipped off authorities about the alleged fraud scheme. While she didn't explicitly confirm or deny being a source for investigators, she definitely played into the speculation with coy comments and knowing looks that suggested she might have had a role in bringing Wendy's alleged crimes to light. The ambiguity kept her audience engaged and speculating about what exactly Keiarna knew and when she knew it. The tone of Keiarna's content was unforgiving and gleeful in a way that bothered some observers who felt that celebrating anyone's legal troubles was inappropriate, regardless of past conflicts. Critics argued that Keiarna was being cruel and taking pleasure in someone else's very serious problems. However, Keiarna's supporters countered that Wendy had spent years looking down on others and judging them harshly, so it was natural for people she had criticized to feel some satisfaction seeing her face consequences for allegedly criminal behavior. And now people are left thinking about something uncomfortable. when critics who were dismissed as haters turn out to be right about someone's character all along? Does that change how we should evaluate criticism of public figures in the future? The speculation that Keiarna Stewart might have been the person who tipped off authorities about Wendy Osefo's alleged insurance fraud added another layer of intrigue to an already explosive situation. Evidence from Keiarna's previous posts and comments suggested she may have had inside information about the scheme before it became public knowledge. Months before Wendy's arrest, Keiarna had made cryptic posts on social media hinting that trouble was coming for Wendy. She had made comments about karma catching up to people who pretend to be perfect, and had specifically mentioned that Wendy's house of cards would eventually fall. At the time, followers had interpreted these comments as general shade or speculation, but in retrospect they seemed to indicate Keiarna had specific knowledge about investigations or problems brewing in Wendy's life. In one particularly telling post from several weeks before the arrest, Keiarna had written about insurance fraud and how people who staged fake burglaries eventually got caught because they always made mistakes. The specificity of that topic raised eyebrows after Wendy's arrest on exactly those charges. The timing suggested Keiarna either had advanced knowledge of the investigation or had information about Wendy's activities that she had potentially shared with authorities. Keiarna's network and sources within the reality TV community were well known. She had relationships with people who worked in production, cast members' associates, and others connected to the Bravo universe. The connections meant she often had access to information before it became public, and she had a track record of being right about rumors and stories that later proved true. Her credibility on insider information made the speculation about her involvement in exposing Wendy's alleged fraud seem plausible. After the arrest, Keiarna posted content that seemed to confirm she had known about the investigation before it became public. She mentioned having information months earlier about Wendy being in financial trouble and potentially doing questionable things to generate money. She implied that she had been gathering receipts and information, though she remained vague about exactly what she had done with that information or whether she had contacted authorities. Legal experts who discussed the case on social media noted that insurance fraud investigations often rely on tips from people with inside knowledge of the schemes. Anonymous tipsters who provide information to insurance companies or law enforcement play a crucial role in uncovering fraud that might otherwise go undetected. If Keiarna had information about Wendy's alleged fraud and chose to report it, she would have been doing exactly what authorities encourage people to do when they suspect insurance crimes. The question of whether Keiarna actually tipped off authorities versus just having knowledge of the investigation remained ambiguous. Keiarna seemed to enjoy the speculation and kept her audience guessing about her exact role. She would neither confirm nor deny being a source, instead making comments like, "I know what I know," and "let's just say certain people had certain conversations." The ambiguity kept people engaged and speculating. Some observers criticized the speculation about Keiarna being a tipster, arguing that crediting her with exposing Wendy's alleged fraud gave her too much importance and made the story about their personal conflict rather than about Wendy's criminal charges. These critics pointed out that insurance company investigators and law enforcement had done the actual work of uncovering the fraud, and that focusing on Keiarna's potential role was a distraction from the serious nature of the charges. However, Keiarna's supporters argued that if she did provide information to authorities, she deserved credit for being willing to report suspected criminal activity rather than staying silent. They pointed out that many people who know about fraud don't report it out of fear of retaliation or desire to stay out of drama. If Keiarna had overcome those concerns to provide information that helped investigators, her supporters felt that was praiseworthy rather than something to minimize. The dynamic between Keiarna and Wendy had always been antagonistic, with Wendy largely ignoring Keiarna's commentary while Keiarna continued to critique her. Now, with Wendy facing serious legal consequences for behavior that Keiarna had been highlighting, the power dynamic had shifted dramatically. Keiarna had moved from being a critic dismissed as a hater to being someone who had apparently been right all along about Wendy's character and behavior. People watching the situation unfold started questioning their own assumptions. If someone has inside knowledge about potential criminal activity but stays quiet to avoid drama, what responsibility do they bear when that activity continues? As the reality TV community processed Wendy Osefo's arrest, attention turned to the reaction from her Real Housewives of Potomac castmates and the broader Bravo family. The responses ranged from shocked silence to barely concealed glee, revealing the complicated dynamics within reality TV circles. Ashley Darby, who had been involved in conflicts with Wendy during recent seasons of RHOP, posted what many interpreted as a shady reference to the arrest. Her Instagram story featured text reading "Catching felonies, not melodies," which eagle-eyed fans immediately connected to Wendy's attempt to launch a music career earlier in the season. The post was quickly screenshotted and shared across social media as evidence of Ashley's reaction to Wendy's legal troubles. Other cast members chose more diplomatic approaches, either staying silent or posting vague statements about being shocked by the news. However, their silence spoke volumes to fans who knew the dynamics within the group. Wendy had positioned herself as superior to her castmates, frequently judging their choices and behavior. Now that she was facing serious criminal charges, the lack of public support from fellow housewives suggested that relationships were more strained than they appeared on screen. The online sleuthing community that follows Real Housewives went into overdrive after the arrest, searching through old episodes and social media posts for evidence that might relate to the charges. Fans uncovered multiple instances where Wendy had been photographed or filmed wearing jewelry that she had claimed was stolen in the burglary. Screenshots of her wearing these supposedly stolen items after the date of the alleged burglary circulated widely as evidence that the fraud allegations were accurate. One particularly damning piece of evidence that fans found was an Instagram post from Wendy showing her wearing a specific designer necklace that appeared on the stolen property list. The post was dated after the supposed burglary but before the insurance investigation became public. The timeline proved that at least some of the items Wendy claimed were stolen were actually in her possession, supporting prosecutors' allegations that she had filed fraudulent claims. The discovery of these receipts led to renewed attention on every aspect of Wendy's public image and behavior on the show. Fans began questioning whether her portrayal of wealth and success had been authentic or whether financial stress had been driving her behavior all along. Scenes where Wendy showed off designer purchases or luxury lifestyle choices were re-examined with new skepticism about whether she could actually afford the lifestyle she portrayed. Former cast members and Bravo personalities from other franchises weighed in on the situation, often using it as an opportunity to discuss broader issues about reality TV and authenticity. Some pointed out that pressure to portray success and wealth on these shows could drive people to make poor choices to maintain appearances. Others suggested that Wendy's arrest should serve as a warning about the dangers of building an image based on material possessions and status rather than genuine substance. The reaction from Bravo Network itself was notably restrained. While the network hadn't issued official statements about Wendy's legal troubles, actions spoke louder than words. Reports emerged that Bravo had pulled an episode of Wife Swap that was scheduled to feature Wendy and her family. The decision to remove the content suggested the network was distancing itself from Wendy as her legal situation unfolded, though they stopped short of explicitly addressing the charges against her. Commentary from reality TV bloggers and podcasters was extensive and often brutal. Many drew comparisons to other Bravo personalities who had faced legal troubles, noting that Wendy was now joining what some called the real criminals of Bravo list. The commentary highlighted how her fall from grace was particularly dramatic because she had positioned herself as better than others, making her alleged crimes feel more hypocritical than if someone without her judgmental attitude had been charged. Social media discussions revealed deep divisions about how much sympathy Wendy deserved. Some people argued that everyone should wait for the legal process to play out before condemning her, noting that charges weren't the same as convictions. Others felt that the evidence against her was overwhelming, and that her past behavior of judging others meant she deserved the harsh criticism she was receiving. The debates played out across Twitter, Instagram, and reality TV forums. The situation raised questions about the toll of reality TV on participants, and whether the pressure to maintain certain images contributed to the alleged fraud. Mental health professionals who commented on the situation suggested that the performative aspects of reality TV could create financial and psychological pressure that pushed people to make poor decisions. However, they also emphasized that many people face similar pressures without resorting to alleged criminal behavior, so the circumstances didn't excuse or fully explain Wendy's choices. Observers began wrestling with a difficult question. When someone who constantly judged others gets caught allegedly doing something far worse, does their hypocrisy make the situation more troubling, or does it simply confirm what their behavior suggested all along? The broader implications of Wendy Osefo's arrest extended beyond reality TV drama to raise serious questions about the financial pressures of maintaining a public persona and the consequences when image becomes more important than integrity. The case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of building identity on external markers of success rather than authentic values. Financial experts analyzing the situation pointed out that Wendy's alleged fraud schemes suggested significant financial distress hidden behind her carefully curated image of success. The $450,000 she and Eddie allegedly sought through fraudulent insurance claims represented a substantial amount of money that could indicate serious debt or financial obligations they couldn't meet through legitimate means. The desperation implicit in allegedly staging a fake burglary suggested their financial situation was far worse than they publicly acknowledged. The timing of the alleged fraud was particularly noteworthy because it occurred while Wendy was actively appearing on television, claiming to be successful and financially comfortable. She had flaunted designer purchases, luxury vacations, and an expensive lifestyle on RHOP, creating an image of someone who had achieved the American dream through education and hard work. The contrast between that public image and the alleged fraud to generate money revealed a potential gap between appearance and reality that was deeply troubling. Legal analysts discussing the case emphasized the serious nature of insurance fraud charges and the potential consequences Wendy and Eddie faced if convicted. The 7 felony charges alone carried potential prison sentences that could add up to significant time behind bars. Beyond incarceration, convictions would likely end Wendy's academic career, her political commentary work, and her reality TV presence. The potential loss of everything she had built made the alleged decision to commit fraud seem even more puzzling and self-destructive. The case highlighted how social media and reality TV create pressure to portray success and luxury that may not reflect actual financial reality. Wendy's frequent posts showing designer goods and expensive experiences had contributed to her image as someone who had made it, but that image apparently required more money than she and Eddie were generating legitimately. The pressure to maintain appearances for social media and television audiences potentially contributed to the alleged decision to commit fraud. Commentary from psychologists who study behavior on social media and reality TV suggested that Wendy's case illustrated the dangers of deriving self-worth from external validation and material possessions. Her identity seemed heavily tied to being perceived as successful, educated, and wealthy. When financial reality didn't match the image she wanted to project, the alleged fraud might have seemed like a way to bridge that gap rather than acknowledging limitations or adjusting expectations. The educational aspect of Wendy's image made her alleged fraud particularly ironic and disappointing. She had repeatedly emphasized her 4 academic degrees and her work as a professor, suggesting that education and knowledge were her defining characteristics. However, allegedly staging a fake burglary for insurance money demonstrated either a failure to understand consequences or a belief that she was smart enough to get away with it. Either interpretation undermined the credibility of someone who had positioned education as the foundation of their identity. The impact on Wendy's family, particularly her children, was raised as a concern by commentators who noted that her alleged choices would affect more than just herself. Her children would grow up knowing their mother faced felony charges for insurance fraud and would potentially face bullying or stigma because of her public arrest. The family consequences of allegedly prioritizing money and image over integrity provided another dimension to the tragedy of the situation. The case became a discussion point about privilege and accountability, with observers noting that Wendy's education and professional credentials wouldn't protect her from facing consequences if convicted. Some saw this as evidence that the justice system could work fairly regardless of someone's background, while others noted that people with resources still had advantages in mounting legal defenses that most defendants didn't have access to. The conversations revealed broader tensions about how justice is applied differently to people with different levels of resources and status. Educators and academics in particular expressed disappointment about how Wendy's alleged actions reflected on people with similar credentials and backgrounds. She had been a visible example of someone using education to build success, and her alleged fraud tarnished that narrative. Commentators from academic communities noted that Wendy's situation would likely be used by critics to question whether advanced degrees actually taught ethical behavior or good judgment, which was frustrating for educators working to promote the value of education. The long-term reputational damage from the arrest was likely to be severe regardless of the legal outcome. Even if Wendy were ultimately acquitted of all charges, the allegations alone had permanently changed how she would be perceived by the public. The image she had carefully built over years could never be fully restored once destroyed by felony fraud allegations. The reality that reputation damage could occur regardless of legal guilt raised questions about the presumption of innocence in the age of social media and instant public judgment, and viewers found themselves considering an uncomfortable truth. In a world where maintaining appearances has become more important than actual substance, how many other people might be one investigation away from having their carefully constructed images completely collapse? Months after Wendy Osefo's arrest sent shockwaves through the reality TV world, the case continued to unfold in the legal system while the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. The situation had transformed from a shocking news story into a cautionary tale about the costs of prioritizing image over integrity and the ultimate price of alleged deception. The legal proceedings moved forward with Wendy and Eddie entering not guilty pleas to all charges, setting the stage for what would likely be a lengthy court battle. Their defense attorneys issued statements suggesting the couple had been wrongly accused and that evidence would prove the burglary was real. However, the extensive documentation of items found in the home that were supposedly stolen, combined with the lack of any security system evidence of a break-in, created significant challenges for the defense to overcome. The professional consequences for Wendy began materializing even before the legal case was resolved. Reports indicated that her university was reviewing her employment status in light of the felony charges, and her political commentary opportunities had dried up as news outlets distanced themselves from someone facing serious criminal allegations. The speaking engagements and brand partnerships that had supplemented her income disappeared virtually overnight, as companies didn't want their brands associated with alleged fraud. Bravo's position on Wendy's future with Real Housewives of Potomac remained officially ambiguous, though industry insiders suggested she would likely not return to the show regardless of how her legal case concluded. The network had a history of distancing itself from cast members facing serious legal troubles, and the nature of Wendy's charges made her continued employment particularly problematic. The loss of her reality TV platform meant losing not just income, but also the public attention that had been central to her identity. Kiana Stewart's vindication from being proven right about Wendy had translated into growth for her own platform and credibility. Her subscriber counts increased significantly as people who had doubted her commentary came to recognize she had been accurate in her assessments. Keiarna continued producing content about the case, analyzing each development and maintaining her position that she had been right to question Wendy's image all along. The situation had transformed Keiarna from a critic sometimes dismissed as a hater into someone recognized for having legitimate insights. The impact on Wendy's family was profound and ongoing. Her children were old enough to potentially face questions or bullying about their mother's arrest, and the public nature of the charges meant there was no way to shield them from awareness of the situation. The family faced not just potential financial consequences from legal fees and lost income, but also the social stigma of being associated with alleged insurance fraud. The damage to family reputation and relationships represented costs beyond what any prison sentence or fine could capture. The case had become a reference point in discussions about reality TV, social media culture, and the pressure to maintain images of success. Commentary pieces in mainstream media used Wendy's situation to explore how social media created incentives to portray success that might not be real, and how reality TV amplified those pressures by making someone's lifestyle and status visible to millions of viewers. The broader cultural analysis suggested Wendy's case was a symptom of larger problems with how success and worth were measured in contemporary culture. Legal experts following the case noted that if convicted, Wendy and Eddie faced not just potential prison time, but also restitution requirements to the insurance companies, additional fines, and permanent criminal records that would affect their ability to work in many fields. The comprehensive nature of consequences for insurance fraud reflected how seriously the justice system treated this type of crime, particularly when alleged schemes involved hundreds of thousands of dollars and deliberately deceptive actions. The transformation of Wendy's public image from educated, successful professional to alleged fraudster facing felonies was complete and likely irreversible. Even her supporters, who believed she might ultimately be acquitted, acknowledged that the damage to her reputation was severe and lasting. The case illustrated how quickly carefully constructed images could collapse when confronted with serious allegations backed by substantial evidence. Mental health professionals commenting on the situation emphasized the psychological toll that both the alleged crime and the subsequent arrest and public exposure would take on everyone involved. The stress of criminal charges combined with public humiliation and loss of income and status created conditions for severe mental health challenges. The observation highlighted that while there was satisfaction in seeing someone allegedly get caught for wrongdoing, the human costs were still real and significant. The final lesson many observers took from Wendy's case was about the importance of authenticity and living within one's means rather than prioritizing image above all else. The alleged decision to commit insurance fraud to maintain an appearance of success demonstrated the dangerous endpoint of valuing external perception over internal integrity. The case would likely be cited for years as an example of how the pressure to maintain certain images could lead people to make catastrophic choices that destroyed the very lives they were trying to portray. As the legal case continued toward its eventual resolution, the damage to Wendy's reputation and life was already done. Whether she was ultimately convicted or acquitted, she would always be known as the housewife who was arrested for allegedly staging a fake burglary to defraud insurance companies. The image she had worked so hard to build, the educated, successful, morally superior housewife, had been replaced by a new narrative about alleged fraud and deception. And people watching this entire saga unfold couldn't help but ask themselves a final difficult question. If the pressure to appear successful can drive someone with every apparent advantage to allegedly commit serious crimes, what does that say about the culture that creates those pressures in the first place?